So we have our practice test piece. We have our name extruded with an exclamation point revolved. Now let's move on to our bottom piece. We're going to first draw it on paper. Actually, I'm just going to do it. You don't have to do it, but it'll just help us visualize what we're going to do on the computer. And then we're going to move on to the CAD. Okay, so let's make it in Onshape. So we are going to create a new Onshape document. We're going to make our bottom piece. We're going to start with the easiest. And the first thing we have to do is make a rectangle. In order to do that, we need a sketch. In order to make a sketch, we need to pick what face or plane we're going to do it on. To make things easier in the long run, because eventually we are going to be assembling things, we are going to make everything on this front plane. Okay, that's super important. If you do things on the top plane or the right plane, then things are going to populate differently into an assembly, and it'll be wonky and it'll be harder to follow along if you're doing the video route. So let's make a sketch. Click on the front. I'm going to click on the front face of the view cube, and then I'm going to make a rectangle. I'm going to go through a couple of ways we can do that. We can do it by drawing 4 lines. I like starting from the origin every time. It's just for fun. You don't have to, but it's good practice to keep something solid. And by solid I mean that stays with one dimension. So once I have an enclosed space, meaning I have this circle and square that are orange, I can click on that, it grays out, and now I have a dimensionable shape. We're going to make the rectangle a different way. What if I don't do it on the origin? What if I can't get these two to meet up and it looks funky and it's at an angle? Well, we can fix that by making something horizontal or vertical. So if we want this bottom line to be, if we want this bottom line to be horizontal, we can go to there, click on our bottom line, and it'll straighten it out. Cool. Let's do one more way we can do it with lines. We won't start at the origin again. Let's say I went, maybe too far on this bottom one. And I obviously can't meet up, but I want to go straight. So now we can do an extend and trim, just like we talked about with our practice piece. We can extend this line to that line. Maybe that was weird, a little odd. Try it again. Extend that line to there, and now we have an enclosed space. We now have to trim off our little access line, and now we have a shape. So there's an easier way to make a rectangle, right? We have our rectangle feature. And I'm going to just make a rectangle. Once again, we can dimension it right now, or we can press the escape key on our keyboard and exit out of it, and then we can dimension it another way. So if we have a shape and we don't have any text boxes that indicate the numbers of the lines, the dimensions of the lines, then we can go to this button on our feature bar. That is our dimension. We can either click on 2 parallel lines and set a dimension. We know one of the sides is going to be 5 inches and one of the sides is going to be 5.5. If you are doing this video method, please try to follow along with what I'm doing. I'm going to do 5.5 on this horizontal dimension, 5.5 inches. I can zoom out. Actually, I'm pretty sure there's this zoom to fit window, or zoom to fit, and then that zooms it out for me so that I can see what's going on. We can also dimension again by just using one of the lines that we want to create a dimension for. The other dimension would be 5 inches, so we'll just put 5 in there. We'll zoom to fit, and that is a completely finished 2D aspect to our bottom piece. You'll notice I'm going to do a Control Z, I'm going to undo a couple things, and you'll notice the color of the lines change to blue as dimensions go away. Okay. Now when they're black, that means that they are fully dimensioned, fully constrained to a place. I can click on something, and usually if they're blue, I can start manipulating how this is oriented, where the location is, or what sizes different aspects of our feature are going to be. Now that it is all black, we can move on to our extrusion. So I can finish this sketch by clicking the green check mark, and now I can extrude it. We know that every 1 by piece, so our birdhouse is made out of 1x6 material. That 1 inch dimension is actually for the rough cut, and when it's milled down it becomes 3/4 of an inch. So I can do 3/4 and get an extrude, except I forgot to do something. I forgot to pick a face or sketch with which I'll extrude. I'll change to isometric so that we can see what just happened. We're extruding 0.75 inches, but I typed in 3/4 inches. Okay, so that will automatically do that conversion. With that, our bottom piece is done. We can export as bottom piece as a step file and download it. To our downloads. We'll save that, and then we can turn that in to the Canvas assignment area. Let's move on. We're going to move on to the back piece. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard. I'm going to create a new document, and we will go to the next easiest piece, the back piece. Doesn't have to be caps, just like a little bit of uniformity. We are going to create a sketch on the front plane again. I'm going to click on the front of the view cube. I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so I have adequate space to make a rectangle that is fairly large in comparison to how narrow it is, because I need this rectangle to be 16 inches. That text box was already highlighted in white, by 5.5 inches. Now, 5.5 inches is not on the drawing that you just recently saw, so that is an error on my part, and I'm sorry for that, but all of our, so last video we talked about all of our 1 inch dimensions actually being 3/4 of an inch. All of our by 6 dimensions are actually 5.5 inches. And then we cut to length 16 inches on our miter saw. I'm going to do that again one more time. I'm going to hit rectangle, and then I'm going to make a rectangle. Our 14.349 is a highlighted white box. I'm going to change that by typing in 16 And then, whoops, I wasn't able to do that other text box, so I can just hit this dimension and then dimension that line to be 5.5 inches. I can look at that in an isometric view, and I can now finish the sketch and extrude this new rectangle to be 3/4 of an inch. The other way that we can write 3/4 of an inch is 0.75. Hit that green check mark, and we are done with our back piece. So we will export by right-clicking on the Part Studio 1. We are going to change the file name to back as a step file, download it. A new dialog box will appear saying make sure that you want to download it to the downloads folder. I like that place. And then now I can turn in the new file, our back.step file, into the assignment on Canvas. 2 easy pieces down, only 3 more to go. Okay, so we've gotten 2 of our easy pieces. Let's move on to something a little bit more difficult. We're going to create a new document, and let's do our side piece. Now we only need to make 1 side piece on the computer, even though there are 2 pieces on the birdhouse itself. The same way we copied and pasted some of our letters, we can basically do the same thing, copy and paste our parts as well. So the basic shape is it's a trapezoid. So we're going to start out with a rectangle. We're going to make it tall and skinny this time around. I gave dimensions in our drawing, but moving on to our front piece and our roof piece, we are going to need angles to make those, make that slant line up for all the pieces. So we're just going to make this a 10-inch by 3.5 inch rectangle. Our bottom text box is open first, so we'll make that 3.5 inches. And whoops, let's make our side dimension 10 inches. Just in case you did not know, I am whoopsing on purpose so that if you whoops on accident, you guys can see how to fix any kind of error that you may run across. So there are a couple ways that we can proceed from this point. Okay, I'm going to do one way, and then I'm going to undo all the progress that I did and then start back from this point. So once you get to this point, you can progress 2 different routes. Once again, our side piece is a trapezoid, so we need to make sort of an angle. Unfortunately, Onshape does not have a chamfer in their 2D sketch platform, and that's okay. We have workarounds that we can use. I created a line. When you do that, you need to make sure that you are snapping to this northwest corner. It doesn't matter how long it is, as long as it's past the profile of the rectangle, it will be fine. Now we can dimension from our line to our northernmost line of our rectangle, and that changes from an inch dimension to a degree dimension. And we're going to make this a 30-degree angle. Now when we do this 30-degree angle, I'll show you what this dimension would possibly be. I need to do a point at this location in order to show that dimension. So from there to there, it's approximately 8 inches, which is what I did on the drawing. and that's not necessary to do that dimension. That's an over-constrained drawing. So we'll just undo that. So we have our angle set. Now we could trim off everything and make it just the profile that we want, but we don't have to, and I'll show you why. We can finish this sketch. We can change our view to isometric to make it easy on us, and then we can click on this bottom profile only, change our depth to 3/4 of an inch, finish that extrusion, and then we are done. Okay, and we didn't have to do any kind of trimming at all to our 2D shape. So we go back into the sketch to do the second route, and I'm going to delete this line. What we can do instead is finish this and then we can extrude it. We'll extrude this rectangle 0.75 inches. We'll finish that extrusion, and then we can draw on this again, and we can project our geometry. I'm going to project everything. You can click on this face and it will project all of our lines. What projection means is that it just traces the lines that we already drew. And then we can once again do a line. We can dimension that line to be 30 degrees. Now instead we can finish this sketch and we can extrude this top part. Now we don't want to give more mass to our part, we want to remove. So we're going to click on remove instead of add. And we can leave it 1 inch, we can make it 0.75 inches, and that would just take away the extra mass and not do any excess mass. And we're just going to do that like that for the time being. And then our side is complete. Now there's a third way that we can do it. So let's go and delete this. We'll delete this. We'll delete this. And we'll go back into our sketch. We'll finish it off again. We will extrude it again. 0.75 inches. But this time we can do a chamfer. And we can do a distance and angle on this. Now let's just see what that does. We already know that we need it to be 30 degrees, so we can change the angle to 30 degrees. Now this distance, let's just see what happens. If we change this to 1 inch, then everything projects and our 30 degree chunk gets bigger. Our 1 degree distance is traveling on the top of our piece. So this, between that point and this point, is 1 inch. Now the entirety of this length is 3.5 inches. So we can change that to 3.5 inches, and then we have our finished side piece. So we have 3 ways to make a side piece. Doesn't matter which way you do it, just as long as all of these, the angle is correct, the overall length is correct, and the overall width is correct, and the thickness is correct, then you have a correct part. So we can right click, export, rename the file name to side, step format, download it, okay, and then we can download that to our download folder, just like we have our bottom and back piece. And then we're done with our side piece. Now let's move on to something that is a little bit equal in how difficult it is, but less so now that we know how to use this chamfer feature. That's why I introduced it as a third method of creating the side piece. Let's create a new Onshape document. Let's call it our roof. You can call it your top piece, as long as you have your own naming convention and you can understand the differences. I'm fine with however you want to call it in Onshape, just as long as it's called what it's supposed to be called for the assignment submission. We will start a sketch on the front plane. Now I press the check mark, and I did a little oopsie for you to look at. And now what do? I could, doesn't super matter, I could start another sketch. But now I have two sketches over here in our feature pane, in our model pane. I'm going to delete this first one, and I can, delete the second one, and then double click on the first sketch. Click on the front of the view cube, and the overall geometry of our roof or top piece is again a rectangle. So let's make a rectangle from our origin. Oh no, now I don't have any dimension text boxes. That's okay. Let's dimension our bottom line to be 5.5 inches. Let's dimension any side, east or west, to be 7 inches. Now I want to show you something kind of fun, that you can even do any kind of unit conversion that you want. So if you wanted to do 7 centimeters, all you had to do was type in centimeters instead. But we don't want it to be 7 centimeters. We want it to be 7 inches. Now we can finish our sketch. We can extrude our sketch, our rectangle, 3/4 of an inch. We'll finish that off, and then we will do a chamfer, just like we talked about in the drawing. We want to change this drop down from equal distance to distance and angle, just like we did for our side piece. Change the angle to 30 degrees. Now the depth at which we extruded was 3/4 of an inch. So we'll put that in there. It will visualize for us. Once we hit the green check mark, our chamfer is complete. Then we can export our roof. Okay. And then this will once again download into our downloads folder. And that completes our roof piece. So, we have completed the bottom piece. We've learned how to create a rectangle out of the rectangle feature and lines. We've done our back piece. We've dimensioned while we draw with our text boxes, and we've dimensioned after we finished our drawing. We've done our side piece. We've done 4 lines and a dimension, and then we've done the chamfer after we have extruded our sketch. We have done the top, once again chamfering after extruding. So now we need to do the front piece, and this is the hardest one. We chamfer after the extrude. This is pretty much for every single one. We can draw the circle during the sketch. We can cut extrude a circle after our first extrusion, or we could set a center point and then define a hole. So this one will be a bit more time intensive than our other ones. So we will create a new document, call it our front. This is probably the most appropriate one, where we will choose the front plane. Then we'll choose the front of our view cube, and then our overall, once again, is a rectangle. Our bottom of our piece is 5.5 inches. And then our length is 8 inches. And I'm going to draw in a circle before extruding. Now we need to set some dimensions for our circle. We need to set 3 dimensions: how big the circle is, and then 2 positional dimensions, how far it is from our x-axis and how far it is from our y-axis. So let's dimension our circle, and that dimension is 2.5 inches. It actually doesn't super matter. We can make it 2 inches. The only thing that I care about is the dimension from the center point to our, I'm just going to do the top because it's easier, and that is 2.75 inches. No, it's not. It's 2.5 inches. I got confused with my own notes. Now our dimension from our side is half of 5.5. Now we know, because I put it on our drawing, to be 2.75, and that is half of 5.5. If we did not know that, we could input a formula. We could put in 5.5 divided by 2, and that equals 2.75. All of our lines are now black. We have located our hole positionally, we have put a size to it, and now we can extrude our sketch. And we will extrude. Now there are 2 features that you could click on. You could click on the circle, but we don't want to do that. Or you could click on the outer besides our circle. And we want to make that 0.75 inches. And then we can chamfer just like we did our roof. If we want the roof to sit on it perfectly, then we're going to need to do, once again, a distance and an angle, a 30-degree angle, and a 0.75 inch distance. And then our front piece would be done. Now let's show you a couple of other methods. We will delete chamfer, we will delete the extrusion, we will go in to our sketch, we will delete our sketch, and then we will extrude our rectangle. After we extrude 0.75 inches, and after we chamfer with a distance and angle of 0.75 and 30 degrees, that will be our starting point for the next 2 options. So now we need to sketch from the front of our front piece. We will again project our geometry that we have created, so that way we can tie dimensions to it. We can then dimension a hole size to be 2 inches, distance from the top to be 2.5, distance from the side to be 2 3/4. Apparently it will not allow us to do spaces and slashes, so we'll do 2.75. And then we can cut or remove the hole. And we'll just leave that 1 inch dimension there. And that's the same as what we had before. The next way that we can do it, we'll go back into our sketch. We will delete the hole, we will delete the circle, and then we will input a point. So that's a point that we want the center of our hole to be. Then we dimension the location, just like we dimensioned the center point of a circle. 5.5 divided by 2. Dimensioned from the top is 2.5. We will finish that. And now we have a new feature that I haven't talked about yet. We have a hole feature. And we can select the sketch point to place a hole. That is our sketch point. And we want the diameter of our hole to be 2 inches. And that is all we have to do for the sake of this simple through hole. After that, we are complete. We can export this. Download it to our download folder. And then we can work on assembling our birdhouse. Congratulations, you finished all the pieces. Okay, now we want to assemble our birdhouse. We are currently at my dashboard, and we are going to create a new document again. This will be our birdhouse. After we make it, instead of just going in and doing our normal thing, we are going to switch over to this Assembly 1 tab. And this will allow us to insert multiple parts. Now, we don't have any current documents open. We are going to have to come over to our other documents, go to My Onshape, and we're going to notice something going on in grayed out text underneath our bolded black text. I went ahead and tried importing this, but realized that we have an extra step to do, something that we don't have to do in Autodesk Inventor, so I wanted to show you guys what was going on so that you guys could follow along and get everything imported and inserted into our assembly before moving on to actually going through the mechanics of assembling in CAD. So we have a version 1 underneath the front title text. That's what V1 means. I'm going to insert that part, and you can see me be able to drag that around. Once I click it, it's now in there. I can also just move that around if I wanted to, but don't need to worry about it. If I want to add more, I will need to add a roof. I need to create a version in roof. So I'm just going to click on that text. I'm going to leave it as V1 version 1. Apparently you can change the name of what version it is. That's up to you. Doesn't super matter. We will create it, and then we will insert the roof. I'm going to zoom out so that I can add all of these. We are going to create a version for our side pieces, and we are going to put in 2 of those. We'll go back, we will add a back piece, creating a version and adding one back piece, and then we will add our bottom piece after creating the version for it. Now we have all of our pieces. I'm going to go through that one more time because I exited out of it on accident, and you might too. You might not. Probably smarter than me. We're just going to add all those back in. We have the versions already created, so we don't need to worry about that extra step. We're going to add two sides. A back piece, a bottom piece, then we hit that green check mark and we have everything inserted. Make sure that you have a front piece, a roof, a back, a bottom, a side, and then another side. Since we created all of these on the front plane when we were drawing them, they should all be oriented this way. The locations of our pieces won't be the same, but the orientations of them will be. Let's get started putting this together. Before we start assembling, let's orient our parts the right way. We have currently our front piece oriented correctly, and the roof piece is at an angle, so we won't worry about that. But we can orient our back piece, our bottom piece, and our two side pieces so that they will be facing the proper direction later on in our assembly. To do that is relatively simple. We can click on a part, and if we want to rotate something, then we can click on this dot and dash system, click and drag, and this will rotate something about this will rotate our part around an axis. Okay, it automatically goes to certain degree increments. If you get lost and leave it there, then you can Control Z back to where it was. Once again, click on it, and we're going to rotate this 90 degrees. When we click out of that, we can move on to our next piece. Let's do our bottom piece. And after we click on that, we're going to go to this far, so along the Z-axis, we're going to go to this far rotation feature, and we're going to rotate it so that it lays flat. We are only going to move things 90 degrees, so you can click drag and then just go 90 degrees, and then that makes things nice and perfect. If you want to click out of things, just make sure you hit the escape key. Now for the side pieces, we are going to do them both the same way. So let's see if we can do them both at the same time. I clicked on both the side pieces, and I didn't have to hold the shift key or the control key or anything. I could just click once and then click again on the side piece. And then let's go and rotate about our y-axis. Now both these won't rotate independently, but as a unit they will rotate about a central axis of the first piece that you clicked. And that works just fine for what we need. And then we can move our pieces around. And this is the orientation that we need all of our pieces, except for the roof. The roof is just kind of difficult to we're talking about 30-degree increments instead of 90 degrees. So now that we have everything imported, inserted into our assembly, and oriented the way that we want, let's move on to assembling.